I think that this is by far one of the strongest character builds that I have made in this game, and actually, now that I think about it, it's going to take quite a while for me to surpass the amount of damage, the level of destructfulness that this guy has. It's just so powerful. You know very well, as much as I do, that basically Inferno and Radiance, they are meta because of how they works, because of how runes work, and it's just so filthy. It deals so much damage. And the little disclaimers, like always whenever we talk about this kind of builds, this kind of setups, we do have to give the little disclaimers about the things that you're going to be able to do and the things that you're not going to be able to do. One thing that I like about this is that you can start planning this guy fairly early in the game if you know where to look. As a matter of fact, the bloody gory weapon, you can get it as soon as you begin the game, as soon as you get to Pilgrim's Perch. There's a little shortcut that you can take to get this weapon real soon. The thing is that you're not going to be able to use it that fast because of the stat requirements. It's still going to take for you. You are going to need to go through to be like on mid game if you want to have the stat requirements of the weapons. The second thing, the quest. You're not going to be able to dual wield until you reach the end game, because on the end game you're going to finally complete the quest for the rune that we're going to be needing to dual wield these bad boys, as you see me using right here. And then finally, you have to, if you want to have the bloody gory weapon dual wielding, you are going to need to have to trade it with someone, to go into a group, to ask for someone in the comment section down below to lend you a weapon. And yeah, there's a couple of ways. Now that we have proper working crossplay, there's a whole lot of people that can play with them all together that much more. So that's ideally a faster way to get the weapon. Let that do not deter you though to use one-hand this weapon, because two-hand this weapon. Because the weapon itself, it's just forced to be reckoned with. That said, let's begin with the class, the ideal class that we are going to need for this specific character. So min-maxing. We're going to need a character that has Radiance, that has Strength, that doesn't have any Inferno, that doesn't have any Agility. So the best possible class that you're going to have for this specific build, if you want to min-max, remember that this is only for min-maxing purposes. It doesn't necessarily need to be like this. But the Dark Crusader is just the perfect choice for it, because you have Strength right there, you have Radiance right there, you don't have Inferno, you don't have Agility, so that's just ideal. Another good choice, if you don't have Dark Crusader, then the Hallowed Knight. This is just perfect because this guy has Strength, it doesn't have that much Radiance, but yeah, it's still good nevertheless. And then we have the other Angered Werewolf. This doesn't work that much because we have some points into Agility right here. The Partisan, the Monstrous Infantry, the Black Feather Ranger, Exile Stalker, they all have Agility. We do not need that. Of course, the Orient Preacher, that's also a great choice right here, because you have Strength and you have Radiance, so that's ideal as well. The Condemn, like always, it's the best build that you can make if you want to min-max. This is just the perfect character for every single one. Now we have the Radiant Purifier. You might think that this guy might be the one that you should be using, that you want to be using. But no, because we also have quite a little bit of agility right there. So if you really truly want to min-max, I know that a lot of people is going to say that the Radiant Purifier already starts with some things. This is for min-maxing purposes. The class doesn't really matter. It's just for you to reach that end game level sooner or later, but still achievable for every single class, so it doesn't really matter. I'm just giving you the example for min-maxing purposes. For min-maxing purposes, the Crusader, Hallowed Knight, Orient Preacher, and the Condemned. These are the ideal classes that you want for this. So let's talk about the stats that we are going to need. We're falling short, we're falling a little bit behind if you want to be at 111.20 to reach the hard cap of Radiance, which is 75. It's not going to be that much of a difference because at the end of the day that is the hard cap, so you're not receiving that much in return, but these are the endgame stats that you would want to have. We have Endurance in 22. This is mainly because I wasn't able to one-hand the Bloody Gory without that Endurance right there. And also I did tweak my armor a little bit. We'll talk about the armor a little bit later. But yeah, ideally what you want to do is just moving your armor quite a lot. We are dual wielding Bloody Gories, but just one of them is going to be weighty, so you just have to be able to carry one, and that's it. Vitality, we're sitting on 40, Radiance 70, and then Strength, that is a weapon requirement. The weapon doesn't scale that good with Strength. As a matter of fact, at level 10, the weapon has a descaling in Strength. That is a bummer that we're wasting those points right here, right there. So yeah, there's that. That being said though, the rune allocation for this thing, it's just ideal, it's perfect, and I've tried to do this with Inferno. I'm still going to try to tweak to do it with Inferno, but as of right now I was just able to pull it off with Radiance right here. So now let's talk about the early game stats and the mid game stats that you're going to want to have. Like I said, on early game, you might be wanting to use Pieta's sword for the early game because it's just so much easy to acquire, so much more easier to use, or just a regular weapon for the buff with the buff. But for early game, you're going to need Endurance on 15, Vitality 15, and Radiance should be on 30 for early game. Mid game, that's where you want to have your Strength on 20. Your Radiance should be at least on 32 to be able to basically wield the weapon, like being able to use the weapon that is going to be king. Your Endurance 22, and there your Vitality is going to be 30. So that is going to be your mid game. At that point, you already have your Strength in 20, you already have your Endurance in 22, so mid-game, going forward towards end-game, you want to focus on raising the Vitality all the way to 40, and then the Radiance all the way to 70, which is going to take quite a while. Your damage is just going to be increasing that much more and more and more and more. So the equipment, of course, we are going to be using the Bloody Gory right here. For the catalyst, it doesn't really matter what kind of catalyst are you going to be using. It could be the Abyss Chalice, which is the one that is going to give you more spell slots, but you could also be using the Orient Preacher, which is the first one that you are going to encounter. There's many different catalysts. This is the one that deals the most damage, that allows you to have the more spells. And the main thing that I like to use is Healing Radiance, Radiant Weapon, Blessed Reflections, and Piercing Light. Luckily enough, that's something that I love about Radiance. All of these spells, these four, which is the ones that I use the most, ideally the ones that I always use, healing, this one for DPS, this one for range annoying enemies, and then this one to buff my weapon, you can get them as soon as you begin the game. So there's no lost scenario right here because of how easily accessible these guys are. I want to tell you a little bit more about the Bloody Gory. We are going to be dual wielding with the access of one gem, one socket that we're going to have right here. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. So we are dual wielding the Bloody Gory right here. And the thing is that this guy can deal 700 attack power on a single hit. So if you add your Verlam sockets, it's going to be 1k damage per swing. If you're dual wielding it, it's going to be 2k damage per swing. When you charge the heavy attack single-handedly while using one single sword, is going to be 2k damage to 2.5 depending on resistances and not resistances of the enemy. I'm sorry, scratch that. It's going to be 2.5 to 3k depending on resistances and not resistances of the enemy. Do have in mind that when you dual wield, the weapon is going to get a downgrading damage by like 30%. So even if you charge the heavy attack on dual wielding, it's still going to be quite amazing because each one of the individuals is going to have the damage numbers that I tested, that I told you I made a mistake. The 2k damage is going to be while two-handing it. 2.5k damage is going to be when the enemy is not resistant to holy damage. As you can see throughout the rendition of the playthrough, this is an endgame area. All of these enemies have lots and lots of health, and all of them are resistant to holy damage, so you don't have to care about resistance to holy damage, neither enemies nor bosses, because you're still going to be dealing quite a lot of damage. This thing, charge heavies, could be dealing 5k damage on one single swing. And you do have the hyper armor of the Grand Sword, so that's amazing. As for the armor, I know that a lot of people is going to be wondering about my armor. This is the Abiding Defender Mask's Helm. You cannot get this until you reach these late endgame areas of the game. I'm also using the Judge Cleric's armor right here, and a couple of different choices. This is the thinner one that I have. This one doesn't weigh that much, and I am playing around a little bit with the armor that I have right here, because this allows me to medium roll with this desired stats that I told you previously. You do have to tweak quite a little bit about this. Then we have the Empyrean Pendant, which increases your holy damage, the Mine Owner's Ring, which we always use for every single build, and then we have the Orient Sorcerer's Ring to increase our holy damage. The ring, you're going to get it from the captain right here. You're going to find the captain once again on the second floor of the Abbey right here, the Abbey of the Hallowed Sisters. So that's where you're going to be able to purchase the ring. As for the Empyrean Amulet, if you're following the lighting the beacons, that's at some point you're going to be able to purchase it from our friend right here. So that's where you're going to get the Empyrean necklace. Now, that being said, let's talk about the rune socketing, because the rune socketing is actually going to be quite important because of one single little specific thing. Let's begin with the basic ones for our main weapon. So for our main weapon, we're going to be using just a bunch of Orimots because they increase the radiance scaling like there is no tomorrow, because we are reducing our Inferno attribute scaling. So these guys right here, each one of them is giving us 100 to 150 damage in return. So that is why we're dealing 1k damage, even though that our weapon only deals 700 damage. The game in itself, it's not going to tell you right here, it's not going to show it right here, but still the scaling, it is happening. Now we have 3 of them, and then if you follow the quest line of these guys and you give the rune socket to Gerland instead right here, which is something that I advise for you to do. Do not freeze Sparky, or also remember that someone else can throw the sockets for you, the runes, if they are not using it. These guys, they can be dropped down on the floor, someone else can pick them, they are tradable, so that's something that you can do. And that is very important because we're going to be using right here with this second weapon, with our second Glory Gory, we're using the Crafter's Essence. And what this thing does is that nullifies the weight of the weapon. We're trading 150 damage in our second weapon to be able to dual wield the weapon, and that is basically how this thing works. For the rest of the gems, you can just purchase them right here from Gerlind. They are right here, the Orimon gems that you are going to be needing, and you just need that one more thing. Just to have in mind that for the quest line, when you deliver the 3 rune tablets to this girl right here, to Gerlinde, you have to give the final tablet to her, not to Sparky. If you give it to Sparky, she's going to get mad at you, and she's not going to give you the rune. So you have to give the rune to this girl right here. And that is basically how the builds work. We know that Radiance is meta. One amazing thing is that you always have access to healing spells. You also have access to the offensive spells for distance. Although you dish so much damage that you are not going to want to be using any of that. I also forgot to mention, this is very important. I know that bleeding status ailment is not the best of the ones that you have right now in the game, but each one of these guys has 300 bleeding build up. Yes, 300, meaning in a single tap you're going to be inflicting enemy on bleeding on the enemy once again, purely because you have 600 bleeding build up right here. So that's one free status ailment. Even if it's good, if it's bad, it doesn't matter, because you're going to be able to apply it onto the enemy. One thing that should be considered as well is that the enemy is not going to survive 2 taps of this thing right here. Ideally, the enemy is just going to be killed one shot. If you're doing PvP, the enemy is going to be afraid of how much bleeding they are being inflicted, and they are not going to be able to work properly or realize what the hell is happening. So that's one thing. But with bosses that are not resistant to bleeding, that they can bleed, you can definitely use that thing right against them. There's a couple of steps, there's a couple of things that you need to get this going. But since Radiance is meta because of how useful, how much damage it can deal, this is the most damage that we can deal with a Grand Sword. There's different things that I'm going to be, different little tips and tricks for the players that want to go beyond New Game Plus and to level up their characters. There's better weapons for a mono build, for a mono stat, mono class build. This is just as strong as you get. And it's just lovely. It's just so freaking filthy. Anyways, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Remember that if no one has told you today that you're a gorgeous and beautiful person, you're indeed a gorgeous and beautiful, beautiful person. I will be seeing you goddamn gorgeous and beautiful people in the next one. Have a beautiful day and goodbye.